The galaxy was quiet now, but the silence felt heavy, like the air after a great storm. Once, not long ago, the stars had burned with fire and smoke. Ships clashed in every system. Planets trembled under bombardment. The war between the humans and the Zalari Empire had lasted almost 20 years. It had been cruel, and many thought it would never end. But it did end, and it ended in a way no one expected. At the heart of that ending was a single man, a soldier whose name was whispered across both empires, Commander Elias Kale. Humans praised him as the savior of their species. Zalari spoke his name with bitterness, calling him the blade that cut their empire in half. But in secret halls, even among Zalari leaders, some admitted he was the only reason peace was possible at all. For Princess Liara of the Zalari, the war was more than a story. It had shaped her life. She had grown up in a palace where every wall carried maps of battlefields. Every corridor echoed with arguments about fleets, armies, and territory. She had watched her father, Emperor Dravak, roar in fury when news of another defeat arrived. She had watched her mother weep when young warriors, her cousins, her friends, were lost in distant battles. And always, somewhere in those reports, was the name of the human soldier. He was not the strongest. He was not the oldest. But again, and again he turned hopeless battles into victories. He had faced an entire Zalari armada above the shattered world of Koran, and emerged alive, his fleet broken but standing while theirs burned. That battle ended the war. It made him a legend. Now, months after the peace was signed, Liara was preparing to meet him. The palace on Zalara Prime shone like a crown above the capital city. Its towers were carved from black crystal, glowing faintly under the twin suns. Liara stood on the balcony of her chamber, her silver eyes staring at the sky. The humans were coming. Their ambassador would arrive in 2 days. Alongside him would be their chosen representative, the hero himself, Commander Kale. Her heart was unsettled. She had never met him, but she felt as if his shadow had followed her since childhood. Every history lesson, every war story, every tale of courage or defeat, his name had appeared again and again. To the Zalari he was an enemy. To the humans he was a savior. But what was he truly? Liara turned as her handmaid, Saren, entered the room. "The council is waiting, Princess," Saren said softly. "They will not be pleased if you delay again." Liara sighed. "Let them wait. They argue more than they act. But fine, I will go." She followed Saren down the long halls. Guards in silver armor bowed as she passed. The council chamber was vast, filled with high-backed chairs and tall windows that opened to the stars. The emperor sat at the head, his broad shoulders wrapped in a crimson cloak. His eyes burned with the same fire Liara remembered from her childhood. "Daughter," Dravak said as she entered, "come, sit. You must learn what kind of men these humans are." Liara sat beside him as the council began their endless debate. "They cannot be trusted," growled Lord Veyros, a warlord who had lost 2 sons in battle. "This peace is weakness. The humans will use it to grow stronger." "And what do you suggest?" asked Councillor Terra, her voice calm but sharp. "That we return to war? Our fleets are shattered, our world starving. Another battle would destroy us. They only agreed to peace because of that soldier," Veyros spat. "Kill him, and the humans will lose their spine." Liara felt her chest tighten. "Enough," she said, surprising herself with her own voice. "The war is over. Commander Kale is not here as an enemy. He comes as a representative of peace." Veyros glared at her. "You speak like one of them, Princess." Dravak slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. We will meet the humans and we will decide after. Until then, silence." The chamber fell quiet, but Liara could still feel their hatred burning like fire. That night, Liara could not sleep. She walked alone in the garden where crystal trees glowed faintly in the dark. She remembered stories from her childhood, stories not about war, but about something else. When she was very young, before the war had grown so large, her ship had been attacked by raiders. She had been stranded for days on a frontier world. Her guards had been scattered, and for a time she had thought she would die. But someone had saved her, not a Zalari. Not a warrior, a child, a human boy. She remembered his eyes, bright, determined, filled with fire. She remembered his voice telling her not to be afraid. He had fought to protect her until help arrived. Liara shook her head. That memory was strange, almost dreamlike. She had been so young. Perhaps it was only her imagination. And yet, every time she thought of Commander Kale, the image of that boy returned. It made no sense. How could the legendary soldier be the same boy she once knew? Impossible, and yet... 2 days later, the human ship descended on Zalara Prime. Its design was different from Zalari craft. Sleek, metallic, more functional than beautiful. The palace landing bay filled with guards and banners. The Emperor stood at the front, his crown gleaming. Liara stood beside him, her hands folded, her heart racing. The air shimmered as the humans stepped onto the platform. The ambassador walked first, dressed in formal black, and behind him came the soldier, Commander Elias Kyle. He was taller than she expected, with sharp features and eyes the color of steel. His uniform was plain, marked only with the insignia of his rank. But there was something about the way he moved, steady, calm, unshaken. When his eyes met hers, Liara felt a strange shock run through her. She had seen those eyes before. The Emperor greeted the ambassador with formal words, but Liara could not hear them. Her gaze was locked on Kale. She searched his face, and in his expression she saw the shadow of a boy she once knew. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Kale bowed slightly, his voice calm as he spoke. Princess Liara, it is an honor to meet you. His words were respectful, but his eyes carried something else. Recognition. Liara's breath caught. She remembered the boy's voice, years ago, whispering, "Do not be afraid. I will keep you safe." And now here he was, standing before her, the soldier who had won the war. The banquet that evening was filled with laughter, music, and speeches of peace. But beneath the surface, tension ran like a hidden river. Many Zalari, nobles, stared at Kale with thinly veiled hatred. Some whispered behind their hands, others glared openly. Liara sat at the Emperor's side, forced to listen to endless political words. But her eyes kept drifting to Kale. He spoke little, answering questions politely, never boasting of his victories. He looked almost uncomfortable, when others praised him. At last, as the hall grew loud, Liara slipped away into the quieter halls of the palace. She needed air. She needed to think. But she was not alone. Kyle was already there, standing near a tall window, staring out at the stars. He turned as she approached, his face calm, his eyes thoughtful. "You left the hall?" he said quietly. "So did you," she replied. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Liara spoke the words that had been burning in her chest. "Have we met before?" Kyle's expression shifted. His eyes softened, and for just a second the mask of the soldier fell away. "Yes," he said at last, his voice low. "A long time ago." Liara's heart raced. The truth she had tried to deny now stood before her, living and real. The human soldier who had ended the war was not just a legend. He was the boy who had once saved her life. And now, with the galaxy watching, their paths had crossed again. The night in the palace stretched long, filled with quiet music and distant voices from the banquet hall. But for Princess Liara, the world had grown still. She stood near the window with Commander Elias Kale, her heart unsteady, her thoughts tangled. The man before her was the human hero who ended the war. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she did not see a hero, nor an enemy. She saw a memory. The boy who once shielded her from danger now stood as the soldier who shaped the fate of 2 empires. She whispered again, as if afraid to break the silence. "You were there, on the frontier world, weren't you?" Kale's eyes met hers. He did not deny it. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Yes, many years ago. Liara's chest tightened. The garden lights outside flickered like stars. She remembered the small settlement, the smell of smoke after raiders attacked, the fear that had clutched her heart. And then the boy, his hands trembling but his courage unshaken, had promised her safety. She had never forgotten. You never told anyone, she said softly. I couldn't, Kale replied. The war had already begun. If your people knew, they might have used it against you. If mine knew, they would have called it treason. The weight of his words sank deep. She realized how dangerous that secret had been, how carefully it had been buried. Before she could speak again, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Both turned sharply. It was Saren, Liara's handmaid, her face pale. Princess, you must return to the hall. The council grows restless. They do not like you speaking alone with him. Liara nodded slowly, though her heart resisted. As she followed Saren back, she glanced once more at Kyle. He stood still by the window, his expression unreadable, but his eyes followed her, and she knew the bond between them was real, even if the galaxy never learned it. The next morning the palace stirred with tension. The council met in secret, their voices sharp and bitter. Liara attended, though she quickly realized the discussion was more about suspicion than peace. They call him a hero, Lord Varos sneered, but to us he is the butcher of Quran. Shall we bow to him as if he were a king? He comes in peace, Counselor Terra answered firmly. And it is because of him that we even have peace. If not for Kale, the war would have dragged on until we all burned. He is dangerous, another lord said. Look at the princess. Already she seems under his spell. Liara felt the heat of their stares. She wanted to argue, but the Emperor spoke before she could. He is dangerous, Dravak said, his voice deep and heavy. But danger does not always mean enemy. For now we will watch him. Liara clenched her hands in silence. She wanted to tell them the truth, that Kale had once saved her life, that he was more than a soldier, that he was proof humanity and Zilari did not have to be enemies. But she could not. If she spoke too soon, they would call it weakness. She stayed silent, but inside her, questions burned like fire. Later that day, she walked the palace gardens trying to calm her mind. The crystal trees shone faintly in the morning light and the air was sweet with blossoms. She thought she was alone, until a voice spoke behind her. You walk like someone who carries a heavy weight. She turned. Kyle stood a short distance away, his hands folded behind his back. His voice was calm, but his eyes held quiet understanding. Perhaps I do, Liara admitted. My people do not trust you. Some do not even trust me. Kyle walked closer, stopping near the fountain. His reflection shimmered in the water. I understand. Trust is not easily given, especially after war. Liara studied him. He spoke with no pride, no arrogance. He was not the monster the council described, nor the perfect savior the humans praised. He was something else, something far more human. Why did you fight the way you did? She asked suddenly. You could have destroyed us completely. Many humans wanted that. Why did you stop? Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. Because of you. Liara's breath caught. Me? When I was a boy, Kale continued, I saw more than an alien child. I saw someone who was frightened but still brave. You trusted me, even when you had no reason to. That moment stayed with me. It reminded me, even in the darkest battles, that enemies are not monsters. They are people. I wanted the war to end, not to erase your kind, but to make sure there was something left when the fighting stopped. Liara's throat tightened. She had not expected such an answer. The image of the boy returned more clearly than ever, his voice echoing, Do not be afraid. Before she could respond, a guard rushed into the garden, bowing low. Princess, Commander, forgive me, but you are needed in the council hall. There has been... An incident. The council chamber was filled, with shouting when they arrived. News had just come from a border colony. A Zalari warlord who had refused the peace treaty had attacked a human outpost. Ships had burned, soldiers had fallen, and both sides were now demanding answers. "This is proof," Lord Varos thundered. "Humans will never stop fighting us." "It was one of our own who struck first," Councillor Terra argued. "We cannot blame them for defending themselves." Emperor Dravak sat in silence, his eyes hard. When Kale entered, the voices fell quiet. All turned toward him, their gazes sharp as knives. "What will the humans do?" Dravak asked. Kale's voice was steady. "My people are angry. Some will demand war. But I am here to keep the peace. If we act quickly, we can prevent this from growing. Or you can use it as an excuse to crush us again," Varos snapped. Kale did not rise to the insult. He only met the Emperor's gaze. "I gave my word when I signed the treaty. I will not break it, but I cannot control every voice in the Human Council. If you want peace, you must act as well." The chamber grew heavy with silence. Liara could feel the tension pressing down like a storm. At last the Emperor spoke. "Then we act. Princess, you will go with Commander Kael. Together you will travel to the colony and see the truth with your own eyes. If this peace is to live, it must be tested." Liara's heart leapt. To travel with Kyle, to leave the palace walls, to see the truth herself. This was both a burden and an opportunity. She bowed her head. "Yes, Father." The journey began the next day. A small escort ship carried Liara, Kale, and a group of guards across the stars. The ship was Zalari in design, but part of its crew was human, an unusual sight born only from the fragile peace. Liara spent much of the voyage watching Kyle. He moved easily among both crews, speaking little but always listening. Humans trusted him because he had saved them. Zalari guards distrusted him, yet they obeyed, sensing something in his presence that could not be denied. One evening, as the ship drifted through a silent system, Liara found herself alone with Kyle in the observation deck. Stars stretched endless before them, shining cold and bright. "Do you ever grow tired of being called a hero?" she asked quietly. Kale gave a faint smile, though it did not reach his eyes. "Heroes are stories people tell to comfort themselves. In truth, I am only a man who did what needed to be done." "But they follow you," she said. "Even my father respects you, though he would never admit it." Kale turned his gaze to the stars. "Respect is not the same as trust. Your people hate me, and perhaps they should. I did terrible things in the war. Necessary things, but terrible. All the same," Liara shook her head. "You also saved me. That is not something I can forget." Their eyes met. For a moment, the weight of the galaxy seemed to fade, leaving only the echo of childhood. The boy and the girl who once faced danger together. When the ship neared the border colony, the crew prepared for landing. Smoke rose from the surface, black against the clouds. Villages lay in ruin, their people scattered. The warlord's forces had struck hard, and the human outpost was nearly destroyed. Liara stepped onto the soil, her heart heavy. She saw Zalari civilians crying, humans carrying their wounded, children clinging to parents. This was not victory or defeat. This was suffering. Kale walked beside her, his jaw tight. "This is what war always brings," he said quietly. "It does not matter whose flag flies above it." Liara looked at him, and in that moment she understood. The war was not only about humans or Zalari. It was about survival, fear, and the price of power. And now, as the princess and the soldier stood together on the ashes of a broken world, she knew their bond would be tested again. Because peace was fragile, and already, enemies in the shadows were waiting to tear it apart. The colony lay broken beneath gray skies. Smoke drifted from shattered homes, and the ground was scarred with black craters where weapons had struck. Both humans and Zalari moved among the ruins, some carrying the wounded, others digging through rubble in silence. The cries of children echoed faintly, carried on the wind. Princess Liara stood in the middle of the wreckage, her silver eyes heavy with sorrow. She had grown up in palaces, surrounded by beauty and order. Now she was face to face with the cost of war that never seemed to end. Beside her, Commander Elias Kale walked slowly, his boots crunching against burned soil. His face was calm, but his eyes held the same storm she felt inside. He did not look away from the destruction. He did not shield himself from it. He let the truth of it weigh on him. This was not just a raid, Kyle said quietly. It was meant to ignite war again. Liara turned toward him. You believe it was planned? Yes. He pointed toward the ruins of the human outpost. The walls had been torn apart, but some defenses still stood. The attackers destroyed supplies and communication towers first. That is not the act of wild raiders. It was strategy. Liara's chest tightened. She thought of the warlords on her council, men like Lord Veyros, who whispered that peace was weakness. Could one of them be behind this? As she pondered, a local governor approached, a Zalari elder with weary eyes. He bowed to Liara, then looked uneasily at Kale. Princess, we did not expect you would come yourself. I had to see the truth, Liara said firmly. Tell me, who attacked this place? The elder hesitated, then lowered his voice. A warlord named Zorvak. He and his followers never accepted the peace. They claimed the Emperor's treaty was a betrayal. They came here with fire, shouting that humans must leave Zalari soil. Kyle's jaw tightened. How many followed him? Too many, the elder whispered, and more may join him if nothing is done. Liara felt cold. This was no small rebellion. It was the spark of something greater. That night, the colony gathered in a half-ruined hall to hear from their leaders. Humans and Zalari sat together, though uneasily. The air was thick with suspicion, fear, and anger. Liara stood at the front beside Kyle, her father's command echoing in her mind. See the truth. Keep the peace. A human settler stood first, his voice sharp. Why should we trust them? He pointed toward the Zalari in the hall. Their warriors burned our homes. My brother lies dead in the ruins. A Zalari woman rose in reply, her eyes blazing. And my children starve because humans hoarded food during the war. Do not speak as if only you have suffered. The hall erupted in shouts. Liara raised her hands, her voice steady but strong. Enough. The voices fell silent, though the anger remained. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. We stand in the ruins together, she said, not as enemies but as survivors. Yes, wrong has been done, by humans and Zalari alike. But if we allow anger to rule us, then peace will die here today. Her voice carried across the hall, clear and unbroken. Some still glared, but others lowered their heads. Then Kyle stepped forward. His voice was deep, calm, and steady. I have fought in more battles than I wish to remember. I know what vengeance brings. It never heals. It only burns until nothing is left. If you want justice, then we will find those who did this. But do not mistake each other for enemies. That is what the warlords want, for us to turn on each other until the galaxy burns again. The hall fell silent. Liara glanced at him, and for the first time she saw something rare. Humans and Zalari listening together. It was only a spark, but sparks could grow into flames. Later, in the quiet of the ruined colony governor's quarters, Liara and Kyle spoke alone. The glow of a small lantern cast shadows across the room. You spoke well, Liara said softly. They heard you. Kyle shook his head. For now. But anger is like dry grass. It catches fire easily. If Zorvak spreads his rebellion, this colony will not stand. Liara leaned against the table, her thoughts heavy. Zorvak is powerful. He has allies in the council. I have seen the way some of them speak. If he is not stopped, others will join him. Then we must find proof, Kyle said. His eyes met hers, steady as steel. If the Emperor sees clear evidence, he will have to act. Without it, the warlords will twist the truth. Liara nodded. She felt the weight of her father's crown even though it was not yet hers. Peace was fragile and her people's pride was sharp. If she made one wrong step, she could lose everything. But Kale's presence gave her strength. The boy she had once known had grown into a man who still carried the same promise. Do not be afraid. Over the next days, Liara and Kale walked the ruins together, speaking with survivors, gathering reports, piecing together the truth. Each time, the story was the same. Zorvak's warriors had struck swiftly, targeting humans first, then Zalari, who refused to join them. One night, as they returned to the ship, Liara paused by the landing ramp. The stars stretched wide above, them endless and silent. She looked at Kale, her voice softer than the wind. When I was a child, I thought you were only a dream. I never expected to see you again. Kale's eyes softened. I remembered you every day. In every battle, I carried that memory. It reminded me that there was more than hate in this galaxy. Liara's heart trembled. She turned away, afraid of what her eyes might show. If my people knew, she whispered, they would never forgive me. They would say I let myself be swayed by an enemy. Kale was silent for a long moment. Then he said, then let the truth remain ours for now. What matters is not the past, but what we do now for both our peoples. Liara nodded slowly. His words steadied her, but deep inside, she felt a truth rising, a truth that could not stay hidden forever. On the fourth day, a messenger ship arrived at the colony. It bore the crest of the Zalari Empire, but the soldiers inside were not loyal to the Emperor. They carried the banner of Zorvak. Liara and Kale stood at the edge of the landing field as the ship lowered. Armed warriors marched out, their eyes cold. The leader, a tall Zalari with scarred skin, bowed mockingly. Princess Liara, he said. Commander, Kale. My master, Lord Zorvak, sends his greetings. Liara kept her voice steady. Your master has broken the Emperor's peace. He is a traitor. The warrior laughed. Peace is weakness. The humans will betray you in time. Zorvak offers strength. Join him, princess. Leave the humans to their fate, and he will make you queen of a stronger empire. Kyle's hand brushed the hilt of his weapon, but he did not draw it. His voice was cold as iron. And if she refuses? The warrior's smile faded. Then she is no princess of ours. And you, human, you will not leave this world alive. The air grew sharp with danger. Liara could feel her guards shifting, hands on their weapons. One wrong move and blood would spill. She took a step forward, her voice ringing clear. Tell your master this. I am the daughter of Emperor Dravak, heir to the throne of Zalara. I will never betray the peace he swore to keep. And if Zorvak rises against him, then he rises against me as well. The warrior's eyes narrowed, but Liara did not flinch. She stood tall, her silver eyes shining like steel. At last the warrior spat on the ground. So be it. But remember, princess, when the fire spreads, it will burn you too. He turned and marched back to his ship. Moments later, the engines roared, and the vessel vanished into the night sky. When silence returned, Liara felt her knees weaken. Kyle caught her arm gently, steadying her. You were brave, he said softly. I was terrified, she admitted. That is what courage is, Kyle replied. Doing what must be done, even when fear tries to stop you. Liara looked at him, her heart heavy but strong. She knew the battle ahead would be harder than any war fought with weapons. It would be a war of truth, loyalty, and betrayal. But she also knew she was not alone. Together they would face it. The journey back to Zalara Prime was filled with silence. The ship carried the princess, Commander Kale, and the guards, but no one spoke much. The weight of Zorvak's words hung in the air. He had made his intentions clear. Peace was nothing to him. He wanted war, and he was ready to burn the galaxy to have it. Liara sat in her chamber, staring out at the stars. They glittered coldly, like eyes watching her every move. She remembered the scarred warrior's sneer, the threat in his voice, the way he had spat on the ground as if she were nothing. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to still them. She was the princess of Zalara. She was supposed to be strong, but strength did not silence fear. A soft knock came at her door. "Princess?" It was Kale. "Enter," she said. He stepped inside, his uniform neat despite the long days. His eyes studied her carefully. "You have not eaten since morning." "I am not hungry. You will need your strength," Kyle said. Zorvak will not wait. His words were not only threats, they were promises. Liara turned to face him. "Do you believe my father will act against him?" Kyle's eyes darkened. "Your father is strong, but he is surrounded by men who fear change. Some will hesitate, some may even secretly agree with Zorvak." Liara's heart tightened. She had thought the danger was outside the palace walls, but Kale's words reminded her that betrayal could live inside them as well. "Then what should I do?" she asked softly. Kale held her gaze, steady as always. "When the time comes, you must choose where you stand. And once you choose, do not falter." Liara nodded, though the weight of his words pressed heavy on her. The ship reached Zalara Prime 3 days later. The palace glittered against the twin suns as if nothing had changed. But Liara knew better. Everything had changed. The Emperor welcomed her return with a warm embrace, but the council chamber was already alive with arguments. News of Zorvak's rebellion had spread, twisted into 100 rumors. Some said he was only defending Zalari, honor. Others whispered that the humans had staged the attack to weaken the Empire. When Kale entered, the chamber grew tense. All eyes turned toward him. "Commander Kale," said Lord Veyros, his voice sharp, "we hear your humans are gathering fleets at the border. Is this peace, or is it preparation for conquest?" Kale's voice was calm. "My fleets gather because your warlord struck first. I am here because I want peace, not conquest. But if you allow Zorvak to continue, war will return whether I wish it or not." Veyros sneered. "Easy words for a man whose hands are already drenched with our blood." Liara rose before Kale could respond. "Enough, Lord Veyros. I saw the colony with my own eyes. I spoke to the people. Zorvak is no defender of honor. He kills both Zalari and humans alike. He is no savior. He is a traitor." The chamber erupted in shouts. Some supported her. Others accused her of speaking with human influence. Then the Emperor's voice thundered above them all. "Silence." The room obeyed at once. Dravak's eyes burned as he looked at the council. "My daughter speaks truth. Zorvak has broken my law. He will be judged as a traitor." But even as he spoke, Liara could see the unease in the council's eyes. Some bowed their heads in loyalty. Others whispered in doubt. The unity of the Empire was already cracking. That night, the palace held a great peace summit. Ambassadors from both humans and Zalari filled the grand hall. Music played softly. Banners of both empires hung side by side. It was meant to be a symbol of unity. But Liara felt danger in the air. The words of Kale returned to her. "When the time comes, you must choose where you stand." She sat at the Emperor's side as speeches were made. The human ambassador spoke of rebuilding, of trade and friendship. The Zalari nobles answered with guarded words. Kale stood quietly near the edge of the platform, watching everything with sharp eyes. Then it happened. The music faltered. A shadow moved among the crowd. A glint of steel flashed. Liara's heart leapt. She saw the assassin before anyone else. A figure cloaked in dark armor, pushing through the guards with deadly speed. The blade in his hand was aimed not at her, father, but at Kale. "Kale!" she cried. The soldier turned, but too late. The assassin lunged. In a heartbeat, Kale moved, pulling Liara down as the blade slashed past his chest. Gasps filled the hall. Guards rushed forward, but more assassins appeared from the crowd, weapons drawn. The summit erupted into chaos. Kale rose, his own blade flashing. With swift, practiced strikes, he fought off the attackers, shielding Liara with his body. But there were too many. A blade slipped past his defense, cutting deep into his side. Liara screamed, reaching for him. Kyle staggered, blood staining his uniform, but he did not fall. His eyes burned with fierce determination. "Stay behind me," he commanded. Guards swarmed the hall. Some fought the assassins, but Liara saw with horror that others hesitated, or even stepped aside, letting the killers pass. Betrayal was inside the palace. One assassin broke through the line, rushing straight for her. Liara froze, until Kyle stepped in front of her, taking the strike across his arm before driving his blade into the attacker's chest. The assassin fell. Kyle swayed, his body trembling with pain, but he stood firm. At last, the Emperor's guards regained control. The remaining assassins fled into the shadows. Silence fell over the shattered hall. Kyle collapsed to one knee, his hand pressed to his side. Liara dropped beside him, her hands shaking. "Elias," she whispered, using his name for the first time. "Stay with me." His eyes opened, weary, but steady. "I'm not finished yet." The summit was ruined. Whispers spread like fire. Some nobles claimed the attack was proof humans could not be trusted. Others whispered that the assassins were Zorvak's men. The truth was tangled in lies. In the council chamber, the Emperor raged. "This is betrayal. Assassins in my own hall, guards who turn their eyes away. My empire rots with treachery." Liara stood before them, her hands clenched. She could still see Kyle's blood on her skin. She could still hear the clash of blades, the sound of him shielding her again and again. Lord Veyros rose, his voice sharp as a knife. "This is what comes from trusting humans. See how their presence brings only death." Liara stepped forward, her voice rising. "No, it was not the humans who attacked. It was Zorvak and his followers. I saw it in their banners, in their weapons. And yet you dare to blame Kale, the man who saved me with his own blood?" The chamber fell silent. For the first time, she felt the eyes of the Empire turn fully toward her. Some looked with doubt, others with hope. This was the moment Kale had spoken of. The choice. She took a deep breath, her heart steady. Zorvak wants war. He wants humans and Zalari to hate each other until nothing is left. But I will not allow it. I stand for peace. And if you call that weakness, then know this. I would rather build a future than bury our children in endless graves. Her words rang through the hall like thunder. The Emperor's eyes softened as he looked at her. Pride shone faintly through his anger. My daughter speaks truth. But not all were convinced. Some nobles bowed their heads, while others turned away in silence. The divide was growing, and Liara knew the battle was far from over. That night, Liara went to Kale's chamber. He lay on a bed, pale but alive, his wounds wrapped in silver cloth. His breathing was steady, though pain lined his face. "You should be resting," she whispered. "I've rested enough," Kyle said with a faint smile. Liara sat beside him, her eyes burning with emotion. "You almost died because of me." "I almost died because there are still those who want war," Kyle corrected gently. "And because I chose to stand in the way." She lowered her head. "When I saw you fall, I realized something. Peace is not just a treaty written on paper. Peace lives in the choices we make. You chose to save me. And I will choose to save what we have built, even if my own people call me traitor." Kale's hand brushed hers weakly, his touch steady despite his wounds. "Then you are stronger than you know." For the first time, Liara allowed herself to smile through her tears. Outside, the Empire trembled. War still threatened. Zorvak's shadow grew darker. Betrayal lurked in every corner. But in that quiet room, the princess and the soldier had made their choice together. They would not let the galaxy fall. The palace had never felt so heavy. Shadows clung to the marble halls and whispers filled the air. The attack at the Peace Summit had changed everything. Trust was broken, and fear ran through the Empire like a cold wind. Princess Liara walked slowly through the corridors, her heart restless. She had spoken with courage in the council chamber, but words alone could not heal the wound that had been opened. The nobles were divided. Some followed her father's call for loyalty, but others leaned toward Zorvak's lies. And beyond the palace walls, the people were confused. Some believed humans were enemies. Others prayed that peace would come. The whole empire was like glass, ready to shatter with a single blow. Liara knew the truth. If they did not act soon, the galaxy would fall into endless war. Kale's recovery was slow. His wounds were deep, and though healers tended him daily, he often lay pale and silent. Yet his spirit never wavered. Each time Liara visited, he greeted her with calm eyes, as if pain could not touch him. One evening, as the twin moons rose, outside Kyle spoke softly. "Princess, and there is something I must tell you." Liara leaned closer, sensing the weight in his voice. "I was not always a soldier," Kyle began. "Long ago, before the war, I lived on a border world. It was a place where humans and Zalari still crossed paths, even when the empires were not at peace." Liara's breath caught. Something stirred in her memory. A faint image, like a dream, half forgotten. "There was a fire," Kale continued. "Raiders came, my home was destroyed, I would have died. But a young Zalari girl pulled me from the flames. She gave me water and she told me not to be afraid. She was only a child. But her courage saved me." His eyes found hers. "That girl was you," Liara gasped softly. The memory rushed back. She had been very young, sneaking away from the palace guards during a visit to a border colony. She had seen a boy trapped beneath burning beams, and she had helped him crawl free. She remembered his frightened eyes, his small hand clutching hers. "It was you," she whispered. Kyle nodded. "From that day I swore that if I ever had the strength, I would protect you. Not because you were a princess, not because of duty, but because you showed me kindness when the galaxy showed me none." Tears welled in Liara's eyes. All this time, their bond had been more than fate, more than duty. It was a promise made, in fire, a promise that had lived silently between them until now. "You carried this alone all these years?" she asked softly. Kale smiled faintly. "A soldier carries many things, but this was the one burden I never regretted." Liara reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "Then we will face what comes together, not as princess and soldier, but as Liara and Kale." News came swiftly. Zorvak had gathered his forces. His fleet moved toward Zalara Prime, burning villages and silencing all who resisted. His banner of war spread like a storm across the stars. The Emperor called his generals to the war room. Holograms of ships and battle lines filled the chamber. Voices clashed, each one shouting for a different path. Some demanded the Empire strike first. Others urged retreat. But when Liara entered, the room grew still. She stood tall, her voice steady. "We cannot fight this war with blades alone. If we do, the galaxy will drown in blood. We must show the people the truth, that Zorvak fights for power, not for them." A general scoffed. "And how do you suggest we do that, princess?" "With speeches?" Liara's eyes burned with determination. "With proof, with courage, with unity." Then Kale entered the chamber, walking with slow but steady steps. His wounds had not fully healed, but his presence commanded silence. He spoke clearly. "I will lead the defense, but not only with human ships or Zalari ships. Together, a fleet of both." The council erupted in shock. No one had ever dared suggest such a thing. Liara raised her voice above the noise. "This is the only way. Zorvak seeks to divide us. But if we fight as one, his lies will fall apart. Let the people see humans and Zalari standing side by side. Let them see that peace is not weakness, it is strength." The Emperor studied his daughter for a long time. At last he nodded. "So be it. The fleet will be united." The days that followed were filled with preparation. Human ships arrived at the orbiting docks, their sleek forms glinting in the sun. Zalari war cruisers joined them, their wings unfolding like silver blades. For the first time, two armies that had once been enemies stood side by side. In the training fields, human soldiers drilled beside Zalari warriors. At first there was tension, sharp looks and cold silence, But slowly, as they shared rations and trained together, the walls began to crack. A laugh here, a nod there, a hand offered in respect. Liara walked among them, speaking with both sides. She listened to their fears, their hopes, their stories. She reminded them of what they fought for, not conquest, not pride, but a future worth living in. Kale trained with the warriors despite his injuries. His movements were slower than before, but his presence inspired them. He carried himself not as a commander above them, but as one of them. And slowly, unity grew. The day of battle came. Zorvak's fleet emerged from the void like a dark storm. Hundreds of ships, their hulls painted with his war mark. His voice echoed through the communication lines carried to both sides. Zelari, humans, you bow to weak rulers who chain you with false peace. Join me, and I will give you glory. Resist, and I will burn your worlds to ash. His words dripped with venom, but Liara stood before the fleet with Kale at her side. She answered with her own voice carried across the stars. People of Zelara, people of Earth, do not listen to his lies. Zorvak does not fight for you, he fights for himself. He kills the innocent, destroys homes, and calls it honor. But I say honor is found in protecting life, not in taking it. Today we fight not as two empires, but as one. Today we fight for peace. Her words lit a fire in the hearts of the soldiers. Cheers rose across the fleet. The battle began. The sky was torn with light. Beams of energy lanced across the void, ships weaving through fire and shadow. Human frigates darted between Zelari cruisers, their guns blazing in harmony. Fighters swarmed like silver arrows striking at Zorvak's forces from every side. Kale commanded the front line, his voice steady over the comms. Hold the formation. Protect the flagship. Liara stayed in the command chamber beside her father, her hands clenched as she watched the battle unfold. She could feel every strike, every loss, as if it were her own. Zorvak's ship loomed at the center of the enemy fleet, massive and dark, its weapons tearing through the Allied lines. At last, Kale's voice came through. Princess, it must end now. I will lead the strike on Zorvak's flagship. Liara's heart raced. No, you are still wounded. You cannot face him alone. Kale's reply was calm. I will not be alone. You will guide me. The final assault began. Kale's squadron broke through the enemy lines, his ship darting through fire and wreckage. Zelari and human fighters followed, clearing the path. Liara stood at the command table, her voice steady as she relayed movements. Turn port, fire thrusters, now strike at his flank. Kale obeyed, his ship weaving through the storm. At last, he reached Zorvak's flagship. He landed with a small team, cutting through the enemy guards until he stood in the throne-like chamber of the warlord. Zorvak rose, his scarred face twisting with rage. So, the human dog comes crawling to die. Kale raised his blade. I did not come to die. I came to end you. The clash was fierce. Zorvak was a beast of strength, each strike of his weapon like thunder. Kale fought with precision, his movements sharp despite his wounds. The chamber shook with the fury of their duel. At last, Zorvak forced Kale to his knees, his blade raised for the final strike. But Liara's voice came through Kale's calm, strong and steady. Remember, Kale, you are not alone. Strength surged through him. With a final burst, Kale deflected the strike and drove his blade into Zorvak's chest. The warlord roared, then fell, his body crashing to the ground. The battle outside shifted instantly. Zorvak's fleet, leaderless, broke apart. Some fled, others surrendered. The Allied fleet stood victorious. When Kale returned to the flagship, the soldiers cheered. Humans and Zelari together raised their voices in triumph. For the first time in history, their unity had defeated the shadow of war. In the great hall of the palace, the emperor spoke. Let it be known. Today, the blood of two peoples has mixed not in hatred, but in brotherhood. From this day, Zelari and humans will walk together toward peace. The hall thundered with applause. Liara stood beside Kyle, her heart full. She looked at him, The soldier who had once been a boy she saved, the man who had risked everything to keep his promise. You kept your vow, she whispered. Kale smiled faintly. And you kept yours, to build a future worth protecting. Together they looked out at the crowd, at the soldiers who had once been enemies but now stood as allies. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be struggles, doubts, and scars that would take time to heal. But for the first time the galaxy had hope, and hope was stronger than fear.